What was Jesus actually teaching when he washed the disciples' feet? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of John on Walking Through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to John chapter 13. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 17. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So John chapter 13, beginning at verse 1. Now before the feast of Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And supper being ended, the devil having already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from supper and laid aside his garments, took a towel, and girded himself. After that he poured water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel which he was girded. Then he came to Simon Peter, and Peter said to him, Lord, are you washing my feet? Jesus answered and said to him, What I am doing you do not understand now, but you will know after this. Peter said to him, You shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, If I do not wash you, you have no part with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, He who is bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean, but not all of you. For he knew who would betray him, and therefore he said, You are not all clean. So when he had washed their feet, taken his garments, and sat down again, he said to them, Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. Beginning here in chapter 13 and going all the way through most of chapter 20, we have events that occur over the period of about 3.5 days. That John focuses so intently on these days that they make up almost 36% of the book means that we too should focus on them, as they will take about 30% of the total verse-by-verse section of this podcast. Coming to verse 1 of chapter 13, we find that it is before the feast of Passover. This time marker here, I believe, helps strengthen the case we've been making all the way through the Gospels as to when Jesus was crucified in relation to the Passover. The meal here in John 13 is before the Passover, meaning it was not the Passover meal. That would make this a common meal, just as we have been saying all along, with the actual Passover meal being eaten the next evening at the end of Nisan 14. Because the Jews started their day at evening, that would make this Thursday evening on our calendars, but the beginning of 14 Nisan on the Jewish calendars. Thus, this would be a special day, because the Passover would be observed at the end of it. What Jesus did here is said to have been taken place after supper, meaning it took place after Jesus instituted the Lord's Supper, but before they left for the Mount of Olives. Before getting to what Jesus did, though, John tells us that the devil had already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot to betray Jesus. What is John saying? Well, recall from Matthew's account that before the meal, Judas had already gone out and made a deal with the Pharisees to betray Jesus. That's basically what John is saying. The devil tempted Judas to betray Jesus, and Judas succumbed to the temptation and made plans to do so. Did the devil overtake Judas? I don't believe so. Like was true with demon possession. But Judas was being swayed by the devil, as we can too, if we go off and live in sin. Getting back to Jesus' actions, what he did here was a show of love for the disciples. He took off his outer garment, gathered a towel, and began washing the disciples' feet. He told them that they wouldn't understand now what he was doing, but they would later. When he got to Peter, Peter didn't think it proper that the Lord, the Christ, the Son of God, should be washing his feet. Jesus said that if he didn't wash Peter's feet, Peter could have no part with him, meaning he couldn't be Jesus' disciple. Peter, being Peter, took that statement to the extreme and told Jesus, well, if that's the case, wash his hands and his head. Jesus told Peter that that wasn't needed, for he who is bathed only has to wash his feet because of the rest of the body is clean. The feet were unclean because people wore sandals outside at that time, and thus their feet would become dirty even after bathing. He does tell them, though, that one of them is unclean. Jesus is not talking about the physical hygiene of one of them. He is talking about the actions of Judas, who would betray him. For in this, Judas was spiritually unclean in sin. After finishing washing the feet of the disciples, Jesus gets up, puts on his outer clothing again, and asks them if they knew what he had done to them. He got no answer. He was giving them an example to follow. The disciples called Jesus teacher and Lord, and that was true. However, Jesus wasn't so great that he couldn't be a servant to those who needed service performed. Likewise, they were going to go out and preach as apostles of Jesus Christ. Some would consider them great, yet they weren't going to be greater than their master. So as Jesus had done to them, they were to do to others. Some take this to mean that Christians are to go around and wash one another's feet, even by having foot washing services. Is that what Jesus is teaching? No, he is teaching that his followers were to be servants of one another, and to not think of themselves so highly that they wouldn't stoop down to help those in need. If someone needs their feet washed and can't do that, by all means, wash someone's feet. But people might need some other type of service. Whatever that service is, we should try to perform that service and not think of service as something beneath us. We will be blessed by God if we do this, for we'd be obeying God's commandments. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of John chapter 13, verses 18 to 30, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.